and to my colleagues around the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My topic for today is something called as the new normal, right? The unnecessary need to future-proof. So, especially given the current situation around the world, the phrase new normal has become like a staple. But within the web domain, the new normal has always been there. But it was synonymous with things like being disruptive or being futuristic. So my name is Nisheed Jagadish. I'm a senior manager with Publicis Sapient, and I primarily work in the experience technology domain. The reason that I brought this topic is because of a fight that I had with Vinci Rufus, where I started complicating things too much, and he just shouted at me saying, "Stop complicating stuff." So a disclaimer before I continue with the talk. This talk is just about talking about modern web design principles, right? Although we talk about multiple SAAS frameworks and models, we do not intend to enforce the use of any of them. The end decision is completely based on the client and the user needs. That being said, we have the cycle. There are primarily three parties involved in front-end development, right? The client, the person or the company that wants to implement a feature, app, or a website. The digital agency, a company that provides strategic decisions and creative technical designs and development of screen-based web applications. And finally, the end user, a person or a third party using the product offered by the client and created by the digital agency. Based on the feedback and the user experience of the client, on the user, the client actually starts adding new features and apps, which the digital agency tries to execute. And this circle goes on and on. Now, suppose there are new requirements that come in from the client. A conversation with colleagues between developers is something like this. Guys, we have a new project. Oh, let's propose them Next.js. Somebody who is super enthusiastic about it will say, okay, yes, let's do that. But somebody completely different says, you know what about Gatsby? And then I would pitch in and say, oh, isn't that for static site generation? And then somebody who completely out of the blue will say, oh, have you guys heard about Emma? And like somebody who is really passionate about immutable JS would say, why don't you like immutable JS? And then you would defend saying that doesn't immutable JS have, from JSON to JS problems? In all this, what did the client ask again? That's where we are lost. Now, suppose that the client's requirements are finally clear to us, right? We all go through, as an architect, we all go through this cycle called as the digital dilemma, right? Wherein, as a developer, the first thing that comes to our head is that, okay, once that we have the requirement, should we go with an MPA or an SPA, multi-page or a single-page application? What is the framework that we need to use? Whether we need to use Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, Stencil, Polymer. And suppose we go with React, okay, let's go with a state management tool then. Redux, Immer, Mobex state tree, Recoil, hooks. Then the CSS framework, Bulma, Bootstrap, style components, Emotion, Material UI, Semantic UI, Tailwind.js. And then let's say we have to think about the libraries to be used. We have Lodash, we have Immutable, we have Thungs, we have Sagas, and so on and so forth. And finally, now that we need to deliver it, even the CI/CD is kind of a game that we need to play. And although most of it is kind of driven by the client and their infrastructure, we still might have to do some kind of decisions around whether we need to use GitLab or Circle CI or Jenkins or Bamboo or Netlify or Azure Cloud. Yeah, so this keeps on and on and on. Clients also come up with applications that are legacy in nature, and they want us to upgrade them, right? Or rather enhance them. So the legacy apps work in a different way, right? The cycle typically involves upgrade and deprecation. The upgrades involve adding utilities, libraries, code splitting techniques, and deprecation tries to remove old, unused code. But herein lies with a bigger issue in various large projects. One is that old code doesn't actually get removed, but rather not referenced as much, which basically means that you end up with bloat that leads to performance degradation as well as regression, because you end up with new code, new functions that actually fix a lot of stuff. But then there is also old functions which don't actually work as needed to be. Now that we have our application, in a state that we need to make it work and all, how do we check it? How do we actually make sure that it is up to the mark? Typically, we do something like this, a performance metric. Right? We check web page test to see how fast the application is. We use Lighthouse, we use Pingdom, we use PageSpeed Insights. And we use all these tools in order to first and foremost check accessibility. Then we check the time to first paint, time to first interactive. How long does the application actually take to execute, like the scripting time? The uptime, basically whether the application is up or not, and is accessible via an HTTP request, and any exceptions that we might have. Time for a story over here. One of my friends recently moved from marketing to web domain. And when she moved into web domain, the clientele that she chose was of a very specific niche level. She chose people or women from a particular age group working in a very particular field. And now these clients actually had only one ask: improve our digital presence. We need to be able to engage with our customers much more easily, and also help us with our social media platform. Now, a person who has just moved from marketing to a completely front-end, web developer domain, she didn't think about, I need to build this application in Next.js. I need to push it to Netlify. I need to make sure that I have AWS pipelines ready or Azure pipelines ready or something of that sort. No, she didn't do any of that. On the contrary, she actually used WordPress. She used WordPress plugins, and she had a site up and running within a day or two, because there are themes available for it. And that leads me to this particular topic, right? That there are SaaS frameworks out there. We have e-commerce solutions and website builders like WordPress, Salesforce, Squarespace, 3D Card, Wix, Weebly, Shopify, Amazon Marketplace. These allow clients and customers to go online within a matter of hours, like literally. We also have content providers like Contentful, WordPress, Strapi, Prismic. They all provide a headless e-commerce solution. Here, we don't need to worry about how the dashboard looks or how does the Visivic editor look. They take care of everything. We just need to publish it and then use the APIs. They even provide GraphQL out of the box. And now comes to the testing part of it. In end-to-end testing, we don't even have to write code anymore. With advances in AI and ML, we actually have tools like UiPath, Blue Prism, Percy, Testcraft, etc., which use something called as robotic process automation. It runs in the background while you kind of go through your daily activities, and it records all of that and can mimic it and can fail if suppose none of it works. So you have end-to-end testing there itself. Time for a quick demo of a single-page application that I built. So this is my dummy e-commerce application. It's it has a header, it has a couple of categories, it has a banner, and the categories show up over here. When I click on view, I go to the category landing page. I can add to cart from here. You can see that the cart has updated. I can go to the actual product details, add to cart from there, go to the cart page, remove some stuff, and it just works. Now, if we are thinking about performance metrics, let's go to the Lighthouse part of it right now. Let's generate the report really quickly. You can see that the Lighthouse report is really amazing, right? You have 99% on performance, accessibility, and it has amazing PWA score. Yeah, there's one or two missing over here, but it does have a really good score. Now, let's go back to the presentation. So the problem with client-side rendered applications is usually SEO. That is the most major issue about it, right? That the web crawlers can't actually know what is happening on your website. Sometimes the SPAs which are not optimized for SEO, they just kind of show the basic title or the placeholder at times. You might have seen that for a lot of Angular and React sites that are created from Create React applications. The initial render time is also hampered by the framework and framework loading and parsing. It requires JavaScript to be present and enabled. Now, with a lot of banking applications, they are mostly form-driven, which basically means that it needs to be submitted to the server to get a response. That won't work with a single-page application. More security concerns around XSS, right? And that's the reason why these things are mediated with things like dangerously set inner HTML in React. There are possible memory leaks, obviously, if you are not looking at the code correctly. Load in terms of bootstrapping and component code, you just keep on adding components. And if you're not perfectly chunking it or anything, this is what is going to happen. And finally, framework overload. Think about it. You're going to learn a new framework and trying to keep up to date with it. In the last few months itself, or in the last few years itself, you are gone from Angular to Angular 2 to React to Preact to Vue. You have to keep up to date with all of them, right? Now, let's look at the current state of the MPA. Although the SPAs are written, are based on JavaScript, MPAs can be written in any of the languages, right? You have Java, you have C#, you have JavaScript itself, you have PHP, you have Python, you have Golang. You have a bunch of frameworks over there, and they are very highly optimized, and they have their own templating language in order to, hydrate a template with data. So that comes to this, right? A typical multi-page application. Each page is assigned a template that it has to work with. The template themselves can be either fixed or have dynamic component positioning. The page is requested on an anchor tag or click on a form submission. The page is then assigned a template and provided the data to be hydrated and sent to the end user. This would mean that the browser would reload and the CSS would initialize and JS would initialize. So this would be something like this. So you have a page, then the circle represents a browser reload, and then you keep on moving to different templates, right? So this is a typical MPA behavior. Now, in this particular scenario, what is actually happening is that you're taking the user out of the context of the application and then bringing them back in. So if you're on a very slow mobile network, what would happen is that the user sees a blank page and then comes back. User sees a blank page, then comes back. Now, it is not very engaging and it's not very good in terms of the user experience. Now, as one of the talks that we had earlier in the day about micro interactions are really good in terms of keeping people engaged with the application. Like simple things like a loader or a spinner or a progress bar, it kind of gives you the feeling that there's something happening in the background. And that's exactly what an SPA kind of also handles. So what we need is something like a blended approach where we fetch the page and we replace the page in plain view. So something like that. It just happens instantaneously. Now, what if I told you that whatever demo I showed you earlier was actually an MPA, which is a progressive web application? Yeah, it actually is. So let me quickly show you that. So right now, let's disable JavaScript for a minute. Refresh the page. I go here. You can see that it still works, but these don't work because JavaScript. I go to my categories. I can still see that. I can view it. Happens. Go to cart. It's still there. Cart is empty, but it's still there. Now let's enable JavaScript again, right? I go back to network. Go here, and you see that inside my XHR, I will go to cart. What's actually happening is the cart is actually getting called over here, and the cart page itself is completely rendered. You see this? It's completely rendered from the backend. And what is happening is that it's actually replacing it over here. If I go back to home, what's happening is I get the home page, and again, it is completely replaced over here. And that's how simple it is. You're having a completely multi-page application, which is running as a single-page application, but is a progressive web application. Cool, right? Because now you have a network, and then you can see that there is a service worker associated with everything. Everything comes from a service worker or a disk cache, right? I've done a little bit of a tweaking. Again, I had to make a little bit of complication, right? That's like kind of ingrained in me. What I did is I used modern technology, techniques wherein I chunked the things, and I used a couple of frameworks. So let me go back to the demo, the slides. And this is the framework, the libraries that I used. We have TurboLinks, we have Stimulus, and our good old friend jQuery, right? TurboLinks is basically the thing that does all the heavy lifting, so to speak. It's very simple, actually. What it does is it takes over all the links in your web application or an MV application and says that all your anchor tags are now going to be XHR requests. So whenever I click on it, if it is within the same domain, it makes a request to the backend, gets the page, replaces the body, and merges the head. And that's how you have good SEO. Stimulus, on the other hand, is a simple, lightweight MVC framework. It just says that, if I have HTML that is coming in, I attach a controller to that, and then when the HTML goes out, I detach the controller from that. And that's where jQuery comes in. On connect, it says add an event listener. On disconnect, remove the event listener. So that's exactly what is happening. So let me just show you the code a little bit. All right, cool. So let me go to source. These are the controllers. I have a cart controller. You can see that very clearly that I have a remove item which just does this. I just go to, I just make an AJAX request, and this is your stimulus controller over here. Over here on connect, I say on click, remove item. On disconnect, is off. Remove that event listener. And then inside the init, here you go. This is the modern technique, dynamic import. That's it. That's as simple as that. And what I do is, again, I had to complicate it a little bit. This is the actual architecture behind all that. We have contentful driving the entire content. We have, schemas, which are like content models over here, which are published content. We have Netlify functions that are deployed. We have main nav, homepage, minicart, etc. We have an assembly layer that's using Node ESIs, and then finally we have like the request that actually goes through. So what's actually happening is that each of these that you see over here is a completely independent cloud function that is deployed. Everything that you see over here is an independent cloud function that is deployed. Now, if you don't believe me, let me bring that over here. So this is the banner component. Let me hit it directly. There you go. That's the banner. Now, let me change the banner. So I go to XT Summit. I say, you know what, here's the feature. Let's go there. And I come back over here, go here. And here we go. We have an XT Summit 2021. There you go. And again, it works the same way as an SPA, in terms of UX. But again, you have that behavior. There are a couple of benefits and caveats to this, obviously. You can quickly upgrade the user experience to support SPA-like behavior. SEO is maintained, as you can see, with the Lighthouse report. Components would still work server-side. I can just put off, JavaScript on the client, and it would still work. It promotes simplicity, right, while still staying core to the, still staying, close to the core JS principles, because I'm using Node.js on the backend for Lambda functions. Ability to work with templating frameworks like EJS. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. So if I go back over here and I show you the Lambda function, let me show you minicart. This is my EJS compile. That's it. That's how simple it is. As soon as I, get the response from Contentful or, whatever, I compile it with the response data, and that's it. That's what the body is coming back. So what I can do is I can go over here and change this to mini cart. And I have cart 0 right now, right? So let me go and add something over there. Add it and refresh. There you go. We have a cart 1. So let's go back. And this allows you for micro front-end application-based architecture. Although I've used EJS, that could very well be replaced by Redux or React or Preact or you name it, whatever. And the ability to use service workers. That's exactly what I did. Again, going back to code, I have a simple Webpack configuration over here. And over here, I have not done anything because this is just for compiling my app.js and all. I tried with Workbox, but it didn't work as expected with the Workbox Webpack plugin. Instead, I built it separately over here. So I generated a service worker using Workbox build, and that basically looks at the output files that are created in my distribution folder. If I find it, there you go. And it says that, cache all of that. So that's how it works. Now coming back over here, caveats. State can be managed, again, by API calls to the backend. I would say that would be easier. Again, looking at all the presentations that have been there, that I'm a big fan of PubSub. So I would say PubSub is good. Component states is short-lived, right? Because you're going back and forth between the server. I think component state is kind of short-lived. So you don't need to use state and etc. of that sort. Components may have to be reinitialized based on caching strategy, because sometimes what happens is that you don't want to, might have to, maintain the anchor point when you're scrolling, etc. And that might be lost sometimes. So that might have to be taken care of. It's not ideal for applications that have large tabular data, like stock market data that is keeping on changing, right? Because if you do this, you're basically going to crash a Chrome system on like large tabular data. And then going back to basics might seem daunting to a lot of people who wants to unlearn stuff, right? So I leave you with this. At the end of the day, you didn't realize that it was an SPA or an MPA. For the end user, the user experience matters, right? And that's the core of it. The end user is not looking at what is the backend, how does it work, what is happening. They just need a seamless experience to get what they want and do what they need to do. And that's what I want to end my talk with. Thank you.